On a crisp fall morning in Boise, Idaho, 13-year-old Tenzin is going through one of the most important rites of passage in the Jewish faith, a Bat Mitzvah.
The word Bat Mitzvah means daughter of the commandments and suggests that at this point in a person's life, they're responsible for their own Jewish identity.
Ulai yesh hamishim tzadikim.
And one of those responsibilities is reading from the Torah, is leading a worship service.
Hamishim hatzadikim asher bekirba. Ulai yesh hamishim tzadikim betoch ha'ir.
For Tenzin, it's the culmination of a year of studying, as she learned to read part of the book of Genesis in Hebrew.
It's kind of hard to read because it's made so long ago. There are no spaces between the words, and there's also no accent marks under the characters.
But all the work has been worth it.
I really wanted to come closer to the Jewish community, and I think it's a really cool experience. And I don't know, I just feel more connected with my religion that way.
It is a privilege to enter into such a sacred space as this.
The important event is taking place at Ahavath Beth Israel, a historic synagogue that's been in use for nearly 130 years. It's believed to be the longest continually operating synagogue west of the Mississippi. Originally called Congregation Beth Israel, it was built in 1895 by a group of German-American Jews who had settled in Boise in the mid-1800s. The building sat prominently in downtown Boise, a few blocks from the state capitol. At the time, there were only about 50 Jewish families in Boise, but they played important roles in the community. The synagogue's founders, for instance, included Moses Alexander, who owned a popular chain of men's clothing stores. Alexander served as the mayor of Boise for 2 terms and was also Idaho's governor from 1915 to 1919. He was the first practicing Jew in the United States to be elected governor. Other founders of the congregation, the Falks, also owned a store.
Typical story in the West, Jews tended to come with mining booms. The Jews set up shops selling clothing, dry goods, food, furniture, etc., as towns developed.
The synagogue was designed with a blend of architectural styles that harken back to areas of Europe where Jews had lived.
The outside, the wood shingle, is very typical of parts of Eastern Europe. When you come in, by contrast, it's really Moorish. The shape of the arches is kind of a Moorish revival, which was popular in the late 19th, early 20th centuries. I think for synagogues because it recollects what was seen as a golden age for Jews in Spain.
In 1895, the local newspaper heralded the construction of the synagogue, saying, "When completed, it'll be one of the finest church edifices in the state. A noted rabbi will be here to dedicate the synagogue, and the congregation will engage the services of a rabbi to locate here permanently." It would take some time for that prediction to come true, though. It wasn't until 1994 that the congregation finally decided it needed a professional leader. It chose Dan Fink, a 12th-generation harmonica-playing rabbi with a penchant for dry humor.
It took 99 years, but in Jewish time of thousands of years, I guess 99 years is soon-ish.
Fink would become the very first permanent rabbi in the entire state of Idaho, a fact noted by national news media. And from the beginning, the history and intimacy of the synagogue attracted him.
I always thought it was like a kind of a little jewel. There's just a kind of warmth to this building that is very beautiful to me. Through my rabbin, and I would sometimes just come in here and sit, and it was always meditative for me.
He sometimes needed that quiet to figure out how to manage a growing congregation that was also the result of a merger in 1986 between 2 very different groups. One was the original Beth Israel congregation, which operated in the Reform tradition of Judaism. The other was Ahavath Israel, a conservative congregation formed in 1946 by Polish Jewish immigrants and their families. It followed more traditional customs, including using a different prayer book. Ultimately, the rabbi settled on a Reform prayer book for Friday night services and a conservative book for Saturday morning services.
To see a community that's built by two communities coming together, I think is significant. And I think there's something beautiful in that, and it's part of what attracted me, honestly, to the job in the first place.
After the merger, the larger congregation needed more space for its Hebrew school and events. And the synagogue's historic site was rapidly being encroached upon by an increasingly commercialized Boise.
People often referred to the synagogue as Congregation House of Subway, because the Subway sandwich shop had their sign, on what was basically our shared lawn.
So in 2003, the congregation decided to move the synagogue to a 5-acre plot of land about 2 miles away, where a new school and social hall were being built. Moving a building that was more than a century old took some chutzpah.
When they lifted it off the foundations and you heard that, it was a little nerve-wracking. Once we got past that initial freak as they lifted it off the blocks, pretty confident. Kia Gedolah! Kadima, we go forward. To move a building like that, they have to do it in the middle of the night because they're constantly lowering traffic lights and power lines. And there was a kind of whole choreography to it. The building would wheel and then it would get to the next intersection and the building would stop, they'd lower the lines. Building crawls through, lines go back up, on to the next one. It was a real celebration. We had people carry the Torah scrolls and, hundreds of people walk behind that synagogue, many, many who were not Jewish. It was amazing. It was one of the memorable nights of my life. The idea of journey is so deeply embedded in Jewish DNA, right? I mean, the Torah is essentially the story of a wandering people, of going out of Egypt, and then so much of Jewish history is a kind of journey from one country to another. It was a kind of little microcosm of something that is really at the heart of the Jewish experience.
More than 20 years later, the education building teems with activity.
And ready for Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat.
Children at summer camp are learning Jewish songs and other cultural traditions, like how to braid challah bread, which is eaten every Friday night by observant Jews.
All right, so I'm going to teach you 2 different ways you can braid, which is pinching them together at one end and then braiding just like you would if you were braiding hair. Traditions are important. We say in Judaism, lador vador, from generation to generation. So it's important that we pass down not just the religious teachings, but the things that connect us with our ancestors.
Let's just do a little recap. We are taking a look now at Martin Buber, I and Thou.
Adult education is in full swing as well. And the classes are being taught by a brand new rabbi hired after Rabbi Fink retired.
So there is no I without either an it or a thou.
Johanna Hershenson is one of the more than 1,200 female rabbis who've been ordained in the United States since 1972.
I think what drew me to becoming a rabbi is the opportunity to teach. And not only the opportunity to teach, but to teach Torah, to make ancient traditions relevant today, here and now. Torah is technically the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. Pulling the Torah out of the ark every time I do it is really a special moment, right? I'm taking out these scrolls that the Jewish people have been engaged with for thousands of years. One of my teachers says that Torah study is the longest running book club ever. And I think about that every time I pull those scrolls out. I look and sound very different than a rabbi from 1300, and yet I'm engaged in the same conversation.
Bereshit bara Elohim.
Baruch atah Adonai. Baruch atah Adonai. Eloheinu melech haolam.
That ancient conversation continues in sacred spaces outside of the synagogue as well.
So this is called a sukkah, and we put it up as a celebration of the harvest to remind us of the time when we as Israelites camped in the desert under temporary structures. And throughout the whole week, we eat in them, we sleep in them, and we have our kids decorate them to make them joyous. So there's scissors to cut some string. You can use pipe cleaners. Get creative, okay?
The sukkah is temporary space, but it is still sacred space. A space is made sacred by what we do in it, by how we relate to it, which is relationship, which is supporting community and gathering and holding space for people.
As Tenzin receives the Torah and marks her transition to adulthood, the Jewish community, her family, and her friends are all there to hold space for her.
I view it as such a privilege to hand the responsibility over to this young person.
It's really magical. I feel like I'm on top of the world, and I don't know, it's just so special to touch the sacred scroll.
There's also something special about this ceremony happening in this sacred space, which has been a refuge for Jews for so long.
I feel the presence not only of the people who show up, but of Jews who came before us in this town. And to me, that is just really energizing. It gives me a sense of rootedness, but also a sense of confidence as we find our way forward.